The team of astronauts descended onto the Class 15 Deathworld, a planet avoided by most species in the galaxy due to its hostile environment. The winds howled as their ship buckled under the immense pressure of the planet's atmosphere. Lightning crackled through the thick clouds, striking the jagged terrain below, while the ground seemed to tremble as if in warning. The explorers had no time to waste. They had come here with one goal: to map uncharted territories and learn more about this forgotten world. As they stepped onto the surface, their boots sank into the thick, hostile soil. The air tasted bitter, laced with the sharp scent of sulfur and decay. Around them, the planet teemed with life that existed to kill. Gigantic, carnivorous plants towered above them, their vines reaching for the astronauts, while distant shadows moved across the horizon, predators the size of small buildings. The crew was prepared for danger, but the true scope of it was beyond their expectations. They fought their way through thorns, claws, and the relentless forces of nature. In the distance, a hulking creature appeared, a massive, reptilian beast, its eyes glowing with intelligence as it stalked them. The crew barely had time to react before it lunged. They ran, adrenaline pumping, heartbeats racing. The creature chased them with unnatural speed, its jaws snapping shut just inches from their heels. They managed to get back to their ship, hearts pounding, eyes wide with shock. Analyzing the creature from a distance, the crew marveled at its design, perfectly adapted to survive the harshest of environments, with strength and intelligence that rivaled any species they had encountered before. Then, as the team ventured deeper into the planet, they made a discovery, something no one expected: human-made structures, old and weathered, hidden in the thick jungle. These buildings were unmistakably human in origin, though they seemed to be centuries old. The discovery sent chills through the crew. The question echoed in their minds: who had been here before? And why had they left? The structures, built with advanced technology and signs of habitation, suggested that humanity had once lived here, but no records existed of any past colonization. Their scanners showed no signs of prior space activity. This planet had been erased from the maps, and yet there were clear signs that someone had survived here. They ventured further, finding more evidence: tools, abandoned shelters, and strange symbols etched into the walls of hidden caverns. As the crew investigated, the unsettling feeling grew stronger. Whoever had lived here had clearly adapted to the harsh environment, but the deeper they dug, the more questions arose. What had forced humanity to abandon this world? What had they learned that no one else knew? Their theories grew darker, but they had no answers, only more questions. And then they stumbled upon something truly bizarre: a giant, mechanical barricade, standing guard over something, a hidden entrance leading into the depths of the jungle. The truth began to emerge from the wreckage. In old logs and damaged data records, they discovered that humanity had not come here by accident. Centuries ago, a group of explorers, desperate for new challenges, intentionally settled on the Deathworld. The planet was chosen for its extreme conditions, an ideal testing ground for human survival. But something had gone terribly wrong. The records told the story of a military bioweapons project designed to create the ultimate predator, creatures engineered to adapt and annihilate. However, the experiment spiraled out of control. The genetically altered creatures, originally designed to serve humanity, broke free, and soon, the planet became a place where only the strongest could survive. The original explorers found themselves fighting for their lives, not against the planet's wildlife, but against the very creatures they had created. But they didn't perish. They adapted. They learned how to survive by integrating themselves into the planet's ecosystem, manipulating the predators with their own genetic modifications. What started as a failed experiment slowly turned into a symbiotic relationship. The creatures, now under partial control, became guardians, and the humans who had survived became something different, genetically modified and altered over generations to thrive in this deadly world. The crew learned of the moral quandaries the original explorers had faced. Some had justified their actions, believing the survival of their species was paramount, while others felt the weight of the consequences. The line between human ingenuity and recklessness blurred. As they deciphered more records, it became clear that the planet's human inhabitants had merged with their creations. Over centuries, they had evolved alongside the predators, forming a society where these beasts were not enemies, but partners. The same creatures that once terrorized them now served as protectors, guardians of their civilization. The more they learned, the more they realized how far humanity had gone in manipulating the natural world for survival. The original explorers had not just fought to survive, they had become part of the Deathworld's ecosystem. They had created a balance, using their knowledge of genetics to control the predators. The crew now understood that the planet was no longer a wild, uncontrollable world. It was a carefully orchestrated system, with humans at the center, controlling and thriving in a deadly dance with the predators they had engineered. But the crew's discovery raised a chilling question: if humanity could survive and control such a world, what else could they achieve with their genetic knowledge? Could they replicate these results elsewhere, using the same methods of manipulation and control? The ethical implications were staggering. If the survivors on the Death World had learned to control these monstrous creatures, could the knowledge be used to create even greater threats elsewhere in the galaxy? What would happen if humanity decided to push the boundaries further, creating not just weapons, but entire ecosystems shaped by their will? The crew was torn between the awe of humanity's ingenuity and the fear of its potential for destruction. The survivors on the Death World had built a thriving society, one where their symbiosis with the predators ensured their dominance over the planet. They were no longer just humans, they were something else entirely, a hybrid of humanity and the apex predators they had created. But for the astronauts, the thought of humanity spreading such genetic manipulation across the stars was terrifying. What they had uncovered was too dangerous, too powerful to be allowed to spread unchecked. They debated whether to report their findings or destroy all evidence of the Death World and its horrifying legacy. Some argued that humanity's potential for creation and destruction was too dangerous for the galaxy to handle. Others believed they had to expose the truth, warning other civilizations about the dangers of genetic engineering. In the end, the crew made their decision. They would leave the Death World behind, but they couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had crossed a line, one that could not be undone. As they boarded their ship and prepared to leave the planet's atmosphere, they realized that the universe would never be the same. Humanity had proven it could survive anywhere, no matter the cost. But in doing so, they had shown that the line between creator and destroyer was thin. And in the pursuit of survival, humanity might one day have to face the consequences of its own creations. The crew uncovered the truth through old logs and damaged records. Humanity's involvement on the Death World went deeper than they could have imagined. The planet had once been chosen as a test ground for human survival under extreme conditions, but what they hadn't accounted for was the catastrophic failure of a bioweapons project. The idea was simple: create the perfect predator, one capable of surviving the harshest environments and annihilating any enemy. A military program, aimed at developing genetically modified apex predators, had been initiated with the intent to reshape the future of warfare. But in a twist of fate, the creatures designed as weapons had evolved beyond human control, becoming the planet's dominant species, nearly wiping out the very humans who created them. In their search for answers, the crew found evidence of the humans who had settled here, forced to adapt or perish. They discovered the original explorers' journals, detailing the early days of their survival. At first, the modified creatures were too powerful, too wild to manage, but the survivors didn't give up. They realized they had no choice but to adapt alongside the predators. Over time, they learned to control them, not by brute force, but through genetic engineering. The survivors had used their own knowledge of the creature's biology to merge their DNA with that of the apex predators, creating a hybrid species capable of coexisting with and even commanding the beasts. The humans who had once been forced to flee now ruled the planet. They had transformed into something different, genetically altered and capable of understanding the very creatures that once threatened them. Their connection to the apex predators was symbiotic. The creatures, no longer uncontrollable, became the guardians of their civilization, their size and strength no longer a threat but an asset. These hybrid humans had managed to turn the Death World into a place where they thrived, not just surviving but evolving into a species that had mastered the balance between dominance and submission. The crew could not help but marvel at the ingenuity, but at the same time, horror gnawed at them. What had once been a military mistake was now the foundation of an entire new way of life. The realization hit the crew hard. What they were witnessing was not merely survival. This was a complete alteration of the human race, a disturbing, unnatural evolution. It was no longer just about humanity adapting to a hostile world. It was about humanity becoming part of the hostile world. And as they dug deeper into the survivors' records, the true scale of this hybrid society became clear. The human-predator relationship wasn't simply one of coexistence. It was control over a deadly force that had once been humanity's enemy. And the apex predators, in turn, had become the guardians, protectors of the human settlements, their role far from what anyone could have imagined. The crew was left to question whether humanity had gone too far in its quest for survival. Could this level of genetic manipulation be justified, even in the name of survival? Some members of the crew were disturbed by the idea that humans could create such monstrous hybrids, playing God with their own biology and the biology of other creatures. Others saw it as a testament to human resilience, the ability to adapt and control the most extreme forces, no matter the cost. The question remained, was this the future of humanity? Would future generations of humans resort to creating their own bioweapons, forging alliances with creatures of unimaginable strength? Or had they witnessed something darker, an example of humanity's capacity to go beyond ethics in the pursuit of survival? The crew's unease deepened when they realized the implications of what they had uncovered. This knowledge could change everything. If humanity could learn to control apex predators like this, what would stop them from using that power on a galactic scale? If they could genetically manipulate creatures to serve their will, who was to say they wouldn't do the same with entire ecosystems, planets, or species? The ethical questions were endless, and the consequences of such power were terrifying. The crew debated whether this technology should ever be shared with the galaxy at large. Would it bring about new forms of warfare, new forms of tyranny, or even the eventual collapse of galactic order? The survivors on the Deathworld had created a system where these predators, once their greatest threat, now served as protectors. Humanity had become the dominant force, not through might alone but through knowledge, through control of life itself. They had established a new ecosystem, one where humanity sat at the top, ruling over the beasts they had created. The predators were no longer the mindless killers they had once been. They were tools, servants, and in some cases, companions. The human survivors had effectively become a part of this deadly world, a hybrid species capable of communicating with and commanding the apex predators. But the crew felt a creeping unease as they thought of humanity's potential. What had they learned on this death world? If this knowledge were unleashed, could it lead to more bioengineered monsters, more manipulated ecosystems, more horrific experiments? The very idea of genetic manipulation on this scale carried with it the potential for disaster. The crew knew they could not let this knowledge be spread recklessly. It wasn't just the creatures that were dangerous, it was what humanity might become if they embraced such power. They needed to contain what they had discovered, to keep it hidden, perhaps even destroy the records that could lead others to this planet. In the end, the crew faced a difficult decision. They could not allow this terrifying knowledge to fall into the wrong hands. The Deathworld and its human inhabitants had proven that humanity was capable of much more than they had ever imagined, but they had also shown the dark side of that potential. The balance between creation and destruction was fragile. The crew knew they couldn't allow the galaxy to repeat the same mistakes that had led to the creation of this nightmarish world. With heavy hearts, they decided to leave the planet, taking nothing but the knowledge of its existence. As they boarded their ship and prepared to depart, they realized that humanity's place in the universe was no longer certain. The Deathworld had shown them the full spectrum of human potential, the ability to survive, to adapt, and to control. But it had also shown them the dangers of unchecked ambition. The survivors on this planet had mastered a terrifying new way of life, but at what cost? Could humanity truly harness such power without losing its soul? The crew could only hope that the galaxy would never find out. The crew ventured deeper into the heart of the Death World, finding themselves standing before a strange sight: human survivors. At first, they had thought it was a relic, a remnant of the past, but as they approached, they realized that these were not the same humans who had once fled or perished. These were the descendants of those original explorers, those who had survived the apex predators and turned the planet into their home. They were different. Their eyes gleamed with an unnatural awareness, and their bodies bore subtle signs of genetic alteration. They were not just humans anymore, they were something else entirely. The survivors greeted the crew with an unsettling calmness, offering no immediate threats but no warm welcome either. They explained, in carefully chosen words, that their ancestors had not just adapted to the Death World, they had mastered it. The predators that the crew had encountered, those terrifying apex hunters, were not the uncontrollable beasts the crew had assumed. Instead, they had become the guardians, the protectors of this human society. And the humans? They had changed, integrated with the planet and its creatures, forging an unholy alliance through genetic manipulation. Over centuries, the survivors had learned to coexist with the monsters they had created. The predators, once wild and unstoppable, were now creatures of power and submission under human command. The survivors had modified their own DNA, fusing it with the DNA of the apex predators, creating a hybrid species that had evolved with the planet. This new humanity could communicate with the beasts, understand them, and even control them. The predators were no longer simply weapons of destruction, they were tools, partners in a delicate ecosystem where humans ruled at the top. The crew was struck by the complexity of the relationship between these hybrid humans and the predators. What had begun as an experiment gone wrong had transformed into a tightly controlled society. The predators were used for protection, to guard the survivors against the dangers of the planet, but they also served as symbols of power. The hybrid humans had integrated their knowledge of genetic science into their everyday lives, creating a perfect balance between predator and prey. They had bent the laws of nature to their will, but the cost had been steep. The survivors were no longer entirely human. Their bodies had evolved, their minds altered by their intimate connection with the apex predators. The crew could not deny the terrifying brilliance of what they had seen. It was a stark reminder of humanity's potential, for better or for worse. These survivors were a testament to human ingenuity, to the ability to adapt in the most extreme of circumstances. Yet, as they stood among these hybrid humans, the crew couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something far darker. This wasn't just survival, it was domination. Humanity had become the apex species of the planet, not through conventional means, but through a manipulation of life itself. The ethical implications of what the survivors had done were enormous. The crew debated whether the hybridization of humans and predators could ever be justified. Could humanity really control the power they had unleashed? The hybrid humans themselves seemed to have no qualms about the way they had altered their biology. They spoke of it as a necessary adaptation, a survival strategy in a world that had never given them a chance. But for the crew, this was a moral quagmire. Could a society founded on genetic manipulation, on the merging of man and beast, ever be considered ethical? What had humanity become if they were willing to go so far to ensure their survival? The crew members were split on what to do next. Some wanted to gather as much information as possible, to understand how humanity had managed to survive in such a brutal environment. They believed that the knowledge gained here could be beneficial, that understanding this extreme form of survival could lead to advances in human resilience. Others, however, were horrified by what they had learned. They believed that humanity had crossed a line, one that should never be repeated. The power to control nature, to manipulate life itself, was too dangerous. What if this knowledge spread beyond the Death World? What if other factions, other civilizations, decided to use this same genetic technology? The galaxy would be forever changed. The survivors' control over the apex predators was both fascinating and terrifying. The crew witnessed firsthand how the hybrid humans commanded the creatures. With a mere command, the beasts followed their leaders, as though they were not just beasts but extensions of the human will. It was a chilling sight, these once unstoppable creatures now subservient, waiting for orders, ready to fight, ready to protect. It was a perfect example of human ingenuity and brutality, a stunning display of what humanity could achieve when they set their minds to it. But at what cost? The crew realized that the survivors had not only conquered the Deathworld, but had bent it to their will. The predators were no longer part of the natural order, they were slaves to human technology and genetic manipulation. The hybrid humans had become rulers of a world where nature had once been their enemy, where the very creatures they had designed to be weapons now served as their protectors. It was a world out of balance, but the survivors had learned to live within that chaos, creating their own rules and forcing the planet's creatures to comply. The crew could only stand back and watch in awe mixed with horror. What had humanity done to get to this point? What had they sacrificed to survive? The hybrid humans, living alongside the predators, were proof of humanity's extraordinary ability to adapt. But they were also a warning: what humanity had done here, on this death world, could be replicated anywhere. If this knowledge were shared, what could stop other humans from trying to replicate this twisted form of survival? The potential consequences were unimaginable. As the crew made the decision to leave, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled upon something that could change the fate of the galaxy. The knowledge of genetic manipulation, of controlling life itself, was dangerous. Too dangerous to share. Too dangerous to allow anyone to repeat. The survivors had created a new species, a hybrid society that had learned to coexist with the predators they had once feared. But what if other civilizations couldn't control it? What if this power, this ability to alter life, spread beyond the death world? The crew knew they had to prevent that from happening. They couldn't allow humanity, or anyone else, to make the same mistakes. The hybrid humans had mastered survival. But in the process, they had created something far more dangerous than the world itself. The crew understood that they couldn't let this knowledge leave the planet. Some things were better left forgotten, buried under layers of secrecy. And so, with heavy hearts, they made the decision to erase every trace of the death world, to ensure that no one could use this knowledge for destruction. The survivors might have conquered the death world, but the crew would ensure that the rest of the galaxy would never fall prey to the same fate. They would carry this secret with them, knowing that humanity's darkest potential had been realized. The decision to leave the death world was not one the crew made lightly. As they prepared to depart, they were left with a sense of foreboding that would not fade. The knowledge they carried was like a curse, a powerful, dangerous secret that could reshape the galaxy if it fell into the wrong hands. They couldn't ignore the implications of what they had witnessed. Humanity had become something far more than they had ever imagined, capable of surviving and thriving in the harshest conditions, even at the cost of their very humanity. The crew knew that the hybrid humans on the death world were not just survivors. They had become rulers, not through traditional means, but through manipulation of biology itself. The ability to control apex predators, to reshape life and bend it to their will, was a frightening display of what humanity could accomplish. Yet, with this power came an undeniable truth: humanity's darker side had been exposed. These survivors had sacrificed their humanity, blending with the very beasts they had created, and in doing so, they had forged a new kind of existence. It was a survival strategy, yes, but one that came with consequences that could not be ignored. As the crew gathered their data, preparing to erase any traces of their findings, they faced an ethical dilemma. How could they destroy the knowledge of such an achievement? How could they justify hiding it from the galaxy? Part of them understood the importance of what they had uncovered. This was a testament to human ingenuity, the resilience to survive in a hostile universe. But another part of them recognized the danger. They had seen firsthand how easily this power could spiral out of control. The death world had shown them that there were limits to human ambition, and some lines should never be crossed. Yet the crew couldn't help but wonder, if humanity could do this once, what would stop them from doing it again elsewhere? What if others sought to replicate it for their own gain? They couldn't shake the idea that the galaxy would be irrevocably altered if this knowledge were to spread. The consequences of using genetic manipulation to control life were unpredictable, dangerous, and potentially catastrophic. They had seen a world where humans had been forced to adapt in ways no one had ever imagined. But the question remained, Had they truly adapted, or had they become something monstrous in the process? The hybrid humans had learned to live with the predators, but at what cost? Their society was built on a delicate balance of power, and it was a balance that could easily tip into chaos if others followed their example. The crew knew that they couldn't allow this technology to fall into the wrong hands. It was not just about the predators or the hybrids. It was about the knowledge of how to manipulate life itself. This was a power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, a power that could change the course of history. If someone else, be it a corporation, a government, or even a rogue group of scientists, decided to wield this power, the galaxy would be changed forever. The crew had to make sure that the Deathworld and its secrets were erased from existence. There could be no trace left of what they had found, no evidence of the dark potential humanity had unlocked. As they prepared to leave the planet's atmosphere, a sense of unease washed over them. They had seen the future, and it was a future that could not be allowed to unfold. The Deathworld had shown them both the brilliance and the horror of human ingenuity. They had witnessed the extremes humanity could go to in the name of survival. But they had also seen the price. The survivors had created a society built on manipulation, on control, and in doing so, they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The crew realized that humanity had proven its ability to survive, but at what cost? Had they truly survived, or had they merely become something else? The hybrid humans had taken control of their world, but they had also altered their essence. The crew could not deny the disturbing truth: they had seen the darkness that lay within humanity's drive to survive. The Deathworld had shown them that humanity could adapt to any challenge, but it had also shown them the dangers of pushing the boundaries of what was natural. The survivors may have ruled the planet, but the crew understood that the price of such dominance was far too high. No one else could be allowed to follow in their footsteps. As the crew left the Deathworld behind, they knew they were taking more than just data with them. They were carrying a burden, a secret that could change everything. The galaxy had not yet seen the full extent of what humanity was capable of, but the crew had. They had seen the potential for creation and destruction, for survival at any cost. And they knew that this knowledge had to be contained, sealed away. The hybrid humans may have mastered their world, but the crew understood that this kind of power could never be allowed to spread. If humanity had truly crossed the line, then it was their responsibility to make sure no one else did. As their ships sailed away from the planet, the crew felt the weight of their decision. The Deathworld would be left behind, its secrets buried, its legacy erased. They would not let this knowledge leak into the wider galaxy. The world they had discovered had proven that humanity could overcome any obstacle, but it had also shown them the terrifying cost of that victory. There were no winners in this race for survival, not if it meant sacrificing everything that made them human. The crew knew that the only way to protect the galaxy from the horrors they had witnessed was to ensure that the Deathworld remained a forgotten place. They left the planet behind, knowing that they would never speak of what they had seen, never reveal the truth. The Deathworld would remain a hidden chapter in the history of humanity, one that had to be forgotten for the greater good. The hybrid humans had survived, but they had also transformed into something else entirely. The crew understood that humanity's future could not be built on such a foundation. And as they sailed away, the crew made a silent vow: they would carry the weight of this secret, ensuring that the Deathworld's dark legacy would never be repeated.